Sometimes the moment you stop caring is the exact moment someone realizes they have lost the power they once had over you. And what happens next may surprise you, because the final move is rarely about love, it is often about control. In this speech, you will discover the hidden psychological pattern that appears when a person can no longer influence your emotions, why they may suddenly change their behavior, and how emotional intelligence can help you stay grounded when the final test arrives. If this message is helping you understand emotional patterns and build stronger self-awareness, take a moment to share your thoughts below. Sometimes one realization can change the way you see every relationship in your life. The most powerful moment in any unhealthy emotional dynamic is often the moment when one person realizes they no longer has the same influence over another person's feelings, thoughts, and decisions. For a long time, emotional reactions can become a form of invisible connection. Arguments, explanations, defending yourself, seeking understanding, or constantly trying to fix things can all create a sense that the bond is still active. But when you reach a point where you stop reacting automatically, something fundamental changes. Emotional intelligence teaches us that awareness begins when we recognize the difference between responding and reacting. A reaction is controlled by the immediate emotions created by another person's behavior. A response comes from self-awareness, patience, and inner stability. When you stop allowing someone else's actions to determine your emotional state, you reclaim a part of yourself that may have been lost in the constant cycle of conflict and approval seeking. This shift can be unsettling for someone who depended on your emotional engagement. They may have become accustomed to receiving your attention, your explanations, or your attempts to restore peace. When those patterns disappear, they are faced with something unfamiliar, a person who is no longer easily influenced. The important lesson is that emotional detachment is not about becoming cruel, distant, or without compassion. It is about developing the strength to remain calm even when someone attempts to pull you back into old patterns. Your silence, your boundaries, and your ability to remain composed communicate something powerful. Your inner peace is no longer controlled by external approval. The greatest transformation happens when you no longer need to prove your value to anyone. At that point, the power struggle ends because your confidence comes from within. You are no longer fighting to be understood. You are simply standing firmly in your own awareness. This is the moment when emotional freedom begins. The sudden return of charm and false vulnerability is one of the most confusing moments people experience when they begin to emotionally detach from someone with strong narcissistic traits. After a period of distance, conflict, or emotional exhaustion, a dramatic shift may appear. The person who once seemed dismissive or unavailable may suddenly become caring, understanding, and deeply expressive. They may show qualities that you wished you had seen all along. This change can create a powerful emotional conflict because human beings naturally hold on to hope. Our minds are designed to search for consistency and meaning. When someone suddenly shows kindness after causing pain, the brain begins asking questions. Was this the real person all along? Did they finally understand? Should I give another chance? These questions are normal because emotional memories are powerful, especially when connected to moments of affection and connection. However, emotional intelligence requires looking beyond isolated moments and observing patterns over time. A single emotional conversation does not always represent lasting transformation. Real growth is shown through consistent actions, accountability, patience, and a willingness to understand the impact of one's behavior. Words can create hope, but repeated behavior reveals reality. The key is not to become suspicious of every positive change or close yourself off emotionally. The goal is to remain aware. Compassion and wisdom can exist together. You can appreciate someone's effort while still protecting your boundaries and observing whether the change is genuine. When you stop chasing someone's approval, your perspective becomes clearer. You no longer see only the version they present in a single emotional moment. You begin seeing the complete pattern. This is where emotional strength develops. You stop being controlled by promises and start paying attention to consistency. The greatest power comes when you can acknowledge kindness without immediately surrendering your peace. You can listen without losing yourself. You can care without abandoning your own emotional needs. That balance is the foundation of true emotional intelligence. One of the most powerful psychological experiences that can keep a person emotionally connected is confusion. When someone receives mixed signals, moments of warmth followed by distance, affection followed by rejection, or promises followed by disappointment, The mind naturally tries to find an explanation. Human beings are wired to seek patterns and meaning, especially in relationships that carry emotional importance. This is where emotional intelligence becomes essential. A person with strong self-awareness learns that confusion itself can be information. When communication becomes unpredictable and your emotions constantly move between hope and disappointment, it is important to recognize what that pattern is doing to your mental and emotional state. Instead of only asking, why are they acting this way? A more powerful question becomes, what is this dynamic doing to my peace? The reason emotional confusion can be so difficult is because uncertainty creates attachment. The mind often becomes more focused on solving an unpredictable situation than appreciating a healthy one. When positive moments appear randomly, they can feel more valuable because they seem rare. This can cause someone to hold on to small moments of kindness while ignoring the larger pattern of behavior. Emotional maturity means learning to separate temporary emotions from consistent reality. A single apology, a sudden display of affection, or a brief moment of understanding should be viewed within the bigger picture. Real connection is not built on constant guessing. It is built on trust, stability, respect, and emotional safety. When you stop allowing confusion to control your decisions, you begin to regain clarity. You no longer spend every moment analyzing hidden meanings or trying to predict someone's next move. Instead, you return your attention to yourself, your values, and your emotional well-being. The greatest shift happens when you realize that peace does not come from finally understanding someone else's unpredictable behavior. Peace comes from understanding yourself. When you trust your own perception and remain grounded in your own emotional awareness, confusion loses its power over you. You become someone who observes patterns instead of being trapped inside them. The final attempt to trigger a reaction is often the moment when emotional patterns become the clearest. When someone is used to receiving your attention, your explanations, your frustration, or your emotional energy, your silence and calmness can feel like a sudden change in the entire dynamic. The absence of your usual reaction creates a space they are not familiar with, and that space can become uncomfortable. Human beings are deeply influenced by emotional feedback. When we receive a strong reaction from someone, it confirms that our actions still have an impact. But when that reaction disappears, the person may begin searching for ways to recreate the emotional connection they once controlled. This is where attempts to provoke anger, guilt, jealousy, or sadness can sometimes appear. The important thing to understand is that a reaction does not always mean a healthy connection. Sometimes people mistake emotional intensity for emotional closeness. A heated argument, a dramatic conversation, or a painful exchange can still create a bond because both people are emotionally engaged. But emotional intelligence teaches us that engagement and connection are not always the same thing. A person who has developed self-awareness learns to recognize these moments without immediately becoming involved. Instead of asking, how do I make them understand, or how do I prove my point, they begin asking, what response reflects the person I want to become? This shift changes everything because the focus moves from controlling another person's behavior to controlling your own choices. Staying calm does not mean you are weak. It does not mean you are ignoring your feelings. It means you have developed the ability to pause before acting and choose a response based on your values rather than temporary emotions. The greatest form of strength is not winning an emotional battle. It is realizing you no longer need to participate in one. When someone can no longer pull you into the same cycles of reaction, they lose the ability to disturb your inner balance. Your peace becomes something you protect, not something you negotiate. The power of emotional detachment is often misunderstood. Many people believe detachment means becoming cold, uncaring, or completely disconnected from emotions. But true emotional detachment is not about losing your ability to love or feel compassion. It is about gaining control over your own emotional world so that someone else's actions no longer decide your level of peace. Emotional intelligence begins with the ability to observe your emotions instead of being controlled by them. When someone says something hurtful, creates tension, or attempts to pull you back into an unhealthy cycle, the natural reaction may be to defend yourself, explain your intentions, or seek validation. These responses come from the desire to be understood. But when repeated patterns continue, constantly searching for understanding from another person can slowly drain your energy. Detachment creates a moment of awareness. It allows you to step back and recognize what is happening without immediately becoming consumed by it. You begin to see the difference between what you can control and what you cannot. You cannot control another person's choices, thoughts, or willingness to change, but you can control your boundaries, your responses, and the meaning you give to their behavior. This inner shift is powerful because it removes the emotional fuel that keeps unhealthy dynamics alive. When you stop reacting from fear, anger, or the need for approval, you become harder to manipulate. Your calmness is not a performance. It is a reflection of self-respect and emotional maturity. The goal is not to punish someone by withdrawing your attention. The goal is to return your attention to yourself. Your dreams, your values, your growth, and your emotional health become the center of your life again. True emotional freedom arrives when you no longer need another person to behave a certain way for you to feel complete. You can acknowledge someone's actions without allowing them to define your worth. You can care without carrying their chaos. You can forgive without returning to the same patterns. That is the real strength of emotional detachment, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of self-control. Silence is often misunderstood because many people see it only as the absence of words. But from a psychological perspective, silence can reveal what constant communication often hides. When a person stops explaining, defending, arguing, or trying to convince someone to understand them, the entire emotional dynamic begins to change. In many difficult relationships, endless conversations can become a distraction. One person may spend countless hours explaining their feelings, proving their intentions, or hoping that the right words will finally create understanding. But when those conversations repeatedly lead nowhere, silence can become a moment of clarity. It removes the noise and allows reality to become easier to see. Emotional intelligence teaches that silence is not about punishment or revenge. It is about creating space for awareness. When you stop reacting to every comment, every accusation, or every attempt to pull you into conflict, you create an opportunity to observe the situation from a calmer perspective. You begin noticing patterns that were difficult to recognize when you were emotionally overwhelmed. For someone who was accustomed to receiving constant emotional responses, this change can feel unexpected. They may no longer receive the same explanations, the same arguments, or the same emotional energy. The absence of that familiar response can become a mirror, reflecting the reality of the situation more clearly. But the true purpose of silence is not to make someone else uncomfortable. The true purpose is to reconnect with yourself. Silence gives you the opportunity to listen to your own thoughts, recognize your own needs, and understand what you genuinely want moving forward. A person with emotional strength does not use silence as a weapon. They use it as wisdom. They understand that not every battle requires a response, and not every misunderstanding requires endless explanation. Sometimes the strongest message you can communicate is the peace you maintain when you no longer feel the need to prove yourself. In that moment, silence becomes more than the absence of words. It becomes evidence that you have regained control over your own emotional world. You are no longer trapped in the cycle of reaction. You are choosing awareness, balance, and inner stability. Protecting your identity is one of the most important steps in breaking free from any emotionally draining dynamic. When a person becomes deeply focused on gaining someone else's approval, they can slowly begin to lose connection with their own values, beliefs, and sense of self. Their decisions become influenced by the desire to be accepted rather than by what truly feels right for them. Emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness. It requires understanding that your worth is not something another person can give or take away. Approval, attention, and recognition from others may feel good, but they should never become the foundation of your identity. When your confidence depends on someone else's reactions, your emotional stability becomes vulnerable to their behavior. A person who has developed strong self-awareness begins asking different questions. Instead of asking, how can I make someone see my value? They begin asking, why do I need someone else to confirm what I already know about myself? This shift represents a major transformation because it moves power from external validation to internal confidence. Protecting your identity means remembering who you were before the criticism, confusion, or emotional pressure affected your perspective. It means reconnecting with your passions, your goals, your friendships, and the qualities that make you unique. Your life cannot be reduced to how someone else treats you. When you strengthen your sense of self, manipulation becomes less effective because you are no longer searching for another person to complete you. You are already connected to your own purpose and direction. This does not mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. The strongest people are not those who never experience emotional pain. They are the ones who learn from that pain and use it as a path toward greater awareness. They understand that losing themselves to maintain a connection is a price too high to pay. True emotional freedom begins when you realize that your identity belongs to you. Your peace, your confidence, and your future are not determined by another person's approval. They are built through the relationship you have with yourself. When that relationship becomes strong, no outside influence can easily take away your sense of worth. The final shift happens when you stop living for a reaction from someone else and start living from a place of inner peace. Many people spend years hoping that someone will finally understand their pain, recognize their value, or admit the impact of their actions. But emotional freedom begins when you realize that your healing cannot depend on another person's awareness. Emotional intelligence teaches us that the strongest form of growth is not revenge, proving a point, or making someone regret losing access to you. Those desires keep you emotionally connected to the same cycle you are trying to escape. As long as your happiness depends on someone else's regret, apology, or reaction, they still have a place in your emotional world. The true transformation occurs when you choose yourself without needing to destroy anyone else. You stop trying to win the emotional battle because you understand that peace is a greater victory than being right. You no longer need to convince someone of your worth because you have already accepted it within yourself. This does not mean forgetting what happened or pretending that painful experiences never existed. It means taking the lessons, building stronger boundaries, and moving forward with greater wisdom. You can acknowledge the past without allowing it to control your future. A person with emotional strength understands that every ending carries an opportunity for growth. Instead of asking, will they realize what they lost? They begin asking, what can I create now that I have found myself again? This question changes the entire direction of life. The most powerful transformation is quiet. It happens when you wake up one day and realize that the things that once controlled your emotions no longer have the same power. You no longer wait for validation. You no longer chase closure from someone else. You create your own closure through acceptance and self-respect. The final victory is not making someone feel your absence. The final victory is reaching a place where your life feels complete even without their presence. When you choose yourself with confidence and compassion, you step into a level of emotional freedom that no one else can take away from you. The greatest realization you can reach is this: the moment you stop caring about controlling someone else's reaction is the moment you begin controlling your own life again. The final trick is not defeated by anger, arguments, or trying to prove that you were right. It is defeated when you become emotionally unavailable to the chaos that once consumed your energy. Remember, your power was never found in making someone understand your pain. Your power was found in understanding yourself. The moment you stop seeking validation, stop chasing explanations, and stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to move forward, you take back the most important thing you ever had, your inner peace. Emotional intelligence is not about becoming heartless. It is about becoming aware. It is about recognizing your emotions, understanding your patterns, and choosing responses that protect your growth. You can be kind without being controlled. You can forgive without returning to the same cycle. You can care about someone without sacrificing yourself. Sometimes people expect you to remain the same person who tolerated everything, explained everything, and fought endlessly to be understood. But when you grow, the old patterns no longer work. Your silence becomes clarity. Your boundaries become strength. Your peace becomes the evidence that you have changed. The most powerful message you can send is not through revenge, confrontation, or proving your worth. It is through the life you build after you stop allowing someone else's behavior to define your emotional world. So remember this: losing your attachment to the chaos is not losing a connection. It is gaining yourself back. The moment you stop begging to be valued is the moment you finally understand that your value was never something someone else had the power to give you. Protect your peace, choose your growth, and never forget, the strongest version of you is the one who no longer needs anyone else to recognize your worth before you recognize it yourself.